Hi.
I should have seen it coming. We were halfway through the counseling session when the opening finally came. Up to that point, it had been surface level, calendar conflicts, missed date nights, who forgot to pick up groceries. I'd waited because what I needed to say wasn't about groceries. I kept my voice steady when I spoke. I've been feeling disconnected. What I need is more than routine. I need us to talk again. To be affectionate. To respect each other, not just manage life side by side. As soon as the words left my mouth, I saw it, the flicker behind her eyes. Calculation. Then the corner of her mouth curled. She shook her head slightly and let out a soft, dismissive laugh. Your needs are immature. The air seemed to shift. I kept my posture neutral, though my chest felt hollow. The therapist glanced between us, her expression tightening but her lips remained closed. No challenge. No question. It wasn't a slip. It wasn't frustration. It was delivered as fact, carefully chosen and intentional. A line drawn. I didn't speak again for the rest of the session. Neither did she, except to answer the therapist's polite closing questions. In the car afterward, she hummed softly to herself, flipping through radio stations. My hand stayed relaxed on the wheel, my gaze fixed forward. But inside, something fragile had quietly fractured. Not anger. Not hurt. Just a clear, icy recognition. Whatever partnership we'd once had was no longer mutual. That night at dinner, the dissonance deepened. She chatted breezily about weekend plans, the next office party, which of our friends had just booked a vacation. Her tone was light, pleasant, as if the earlier conversation had never happened. I listened, nodded where expected, and carefully masked the weight in my chest. I didn't trust myself to speak more than necessary. Not yet. Later, while she was upstairs on a video call, I sat in the living room with a glass of water, staring at the muted television. The phrase repeated in my mind like a metronome, your needs are immature. Until that afternoon, I had clung to the idea that we were in a difficult phase, that effort and honesty might bridge the gap. But now, the gap wasn't born of misunderstanding. It was the result of her choice, a redefinition of the roles in this marriage. She no longer saw me as an equal. Worse, she didn't care to hide it. In the days that followed, the mask of normalcy remained. One evening she invited friends over for wine and appetizers. I drifted in and out of the kitchen, letting them have their space. As I passed the hallway toward the den, her voice carried through, light, laughing. I'm the adult in this marriage. He's needy. Laughter followed. Not cruel, but indulgent, like gossip about someone below them. I stood still, hidden from view, heart steady but cold. The tone wasn't playful teasing. It was positioning. She was curating her narrative, shifting the story about us to those around her. Over the next week, small signs multiplied. Friends who once greeted me warmly now spoke with a slight edge of condescension. A neighbor's comment about how patient she must be landed like a stone in my gut. Conversations shifted. Subtle, but undeniable. Meanwhile, at home, she acted unchanged, cheerful texts during the day, polite conversation over dinner, even occasional invitations to watch a show together. But every interaction now felt like theater. I found myself studying her words, her expressions, the timing of her gestures. A new lens had settled over my view of her. Not through bitterness, through clarity. This wasn't about my needs. This was about control. Narrative. Positioning herself above me socially and emotionally, while keeping the facade of the composed, benevolent spouse. And beneath that facade, I now suspected, was something deeper. A motivation I hadn't yet uncovered. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. That would serve her script, allow her to paint me as unstable or emotional. Instead, I would watch. I began paying attention to details I'd once ignored. What she said when she thought I wasn't listening. Which conversations she ended abruptly when I entered the room. Small changes in her schedule. The dynamic had flipped in my mind. This wasn't about saving face in counseling anymore. This was about seeing what game was actually being played. One thing was certain, whatever came next, I would not be caught unprepared. In the days after that session, she carried on as if nothing had happened. Morning routines remained the same, coffee brewing before I came downstairs, her plate set neatly at her usual seat. She still texted me midday about dinner or errands. But beneath the smooth surface, I could feel the shift. There was a new lightness in her voice when she spoke to others, especially when I wasn't meant to hear. One Saturday evening, she hosted a small gathering, two couples we'd known for years. I stayed mostly in the background, refilling drinks, tending to the grill. I wasn't in the mood for forced conversation. Later, moving through the hall toward the guest bathroom, I caught her voice drifting from the patio, light with laughter. "I'm the adult in this marriage," she said, that same superior lilt in her tone. "He's needy. Always talking about feelings. It's exhausting." Another burst of polite laughter followed from the group. I stood there, unseen, for a moment longer. Not frozen, just observing. The message was clear. This wasn't just a passing comment. It was a narrative she was actively seeding into our social circle. And judging by the shift in how some of our friends had started interacting with me, slightly more patronizing, more performative sympathy, it was working. She was positioning me as the unstable one, the weaker partner. I could see it now with painful clarity. But clarity brings strategy. I didn't confront her. I didn't even let my expression shift when I returned to the patio with another round of drinks. Instead, I watched. Noticed. Logged it all away. The real clue came 2 days later. She'd left her tablet on the kitchen island while taking a call in the other room. I wasn't snooping, at least not consciously. I went to move it aside so I could set down a grocery bag. But the screen lit up beneath my hand, a preview of a message notification. The name wasn't familiar, Jason, work Jim. The message, in neat preview lines, "He doesn't excite me anymore. He's just safe. I need more." I froze. Not for long, seconds, maybe. Long enough to read it again, to commit it to memory. The casual cruelty of it hit harder than the words themselves. Safe. Not a man. A placeholder. A security blanket she was already planning to outgrow. I moved the tablet aside, face neutral. When she re-entered the room, she smiled lightly, said something about needing to start dinner early that night. I nodded, said nothing. Inside, though, something had shifted again. This wasn't about a dynamic of power in the marriage anymore. It wasn't just narrative spinning. There was something else moving beneath it, another connection, another plan. Over the next few days, I observed carefully. She was suddenly more diligent about her appearance, new workout clothes, longer hours, at the gym, and text exchanges that seemed more frequent and carefully guarded. She'd also become more transactional in conversation with me, questions about joint accounts, casually asking when certain bills would auto-deduct, reminding me about when her car lease was up. All delivered with breezy detachment. That's when it truly clicked. This wasn't a phase of frustration or distance. It was preparation. She wasn't interested in fixing this marriage. She was laying the groundwork to exit it, on her terms. And if I wasn't careful, I would be the one left framed as the unreasonable, unstable party in whatever story she planned to tell. The thought didn't bring rage. It brought a chilling focus. If she believed I was going to react impulsively, give her the outburst she could use to justify whatever move she was preparing, she was misreading me. I had no intention of playing into that script. I began to act accordingly, quietly, deliberately. I reviewed our joint financial statements late at night, logging everything carefully. I started noting patterns in her spending, spa visits, boutique purchases, all timed on days when she'd supposedly been at work late or at the gym. I also began reaching out to a few trusted professional contacts, quietly inquiring about the best family law representation, discreet financial advisement. I left no digital trail she could stumble upon. Every evening, I kept the appearance of normalcy. I joined her for dinner when asked, responded politely to her casual conversation, even offered the occasional warm gesture. And I watched. The more I observed, the more obvious it became, she was testing the waters. Emotionally entangled with this work-gym connection already. Not physical, yet. But headed there. And her sense of control was growing. Each day, her tone with me grew more casual, more dismissive, like someone already imagining themselves free of the person across the table. But what she didn't know, what she'd fatally underestimated, was that I had seen her play now. And I would not be the one left blindsided when the pieces fell. I knew now I couldn't afford assumptions. Only facts would do. So I adjusted. No rash moves. No confrontation. Just quiet, deliberate observation. I made sure my presence remained steady, predictable, even. If she noticed a change, it would be subtle. I began by watching her schedule more closely. She started leaving the house earlier on certain mornings, gym bag in hand, claiming an extra training session before work. On evenings she'd usually be home by 6, she now arrived closer to 7:30, always with a casual excuse, ran late, got caught up talking with coworkers. Her phone, once left casually on the counter, was now face down or tucked away. Notifications silenced. I didn't press. I didn't ask. I simply logged the shifts. Meanwhile, I turned my attention to our finances. After years of trusting her to handle certain household expenses, I now combed through every joint statement myself. It didn't take long to see the patterns. Increased charges from boutique fitness studios, not the gym she'd always used. New transactions at spas she'd never mentioned. High-end dinners on weeknights she'd claimed to be stuck at work. And always on the days following a noticeable coolness in her tone, an extra layer of detachment when we interacted. She wasn't just drifting. She was actively building a new life, quietly reallocating her time, her money, her emotional focus. I started cross-referencing. Through a well-connected acquaintance, someone in the same corporate circle as her, I learned something more pointed. There was a man. Not just casual gym talk or flirtation. Someone she'd been testing the waters with, according to this mutual contact. A fitness coach affiliated with her new boutique studio. Younger, single, and known for cultivating relationships with clients beyond the professional realm. It wasn't a physical affair. Not yet. But emotionally, the line had already been crossed. I processed it without flinching. The emotional hit had already landed the day I'd read that message on her tablet. Now this was about strategy. I needed to know more, and prepare accordingly. First, I protected myself financially. I opened a separate account under my name alone, quietly rerouting my direct deposit. I began documenting every joint expense, every shared asset with timestamps and copies. Then I took a step further, I engaged a trusted family attorney. Not to file anything yet, but to understand exactly where I stood. What I needed to document. What protections to set in place before the situation escalated. At home, I remained calm. Attentive, even. If anything, I let her see a version of me that was steady, supportive. I wasn't going to give her the outburst she seemed to be positioning me for. At dinner one night, she looked up from her salad, studying me over the rim of her glass. "You've been quiet lately," she said, voice light but probing. I offered a small smile. "Just focusing on a few projects at work. Nothing serious." She tilted her head slightly, as if weighing the answer, but didn't press. The role reversal was already beginning. While she believed she held control, curating her story to friends, managing her emerging connection with the other man, I was building my own foundation beneath the surface. And the more detached I became, the more unsettled she seemed to grow. The following weekend, she floated the idea of a weekend trip, to clear her head, an old friend's cabin, she claimed. But her phrasing was hesitant, and her explanations too rehearsed. I simply nodded. "If you think it'll help, go ahead." She watched me a moment longer than necessary, as if waiting for a reaction. When none came, she shifted the conversation to another topic. Inside, I could feel her uncertainty growing. The version of me she was trying to depict, the needy, immature spouse prone to emotional outbursts, wasn't materializing. And I had no intention of ever letting it. What had started as suspicion was now becoming certainty. And certainty demanded preparation. The next phase was clear: document everything. Prepare for whatever move she was building toward. If she believed this would be a clean break on her terms, she was in for a surprise. I would not lose my footing. Not financially. Not socially. Not emotionally. Not again. I knew the next step required more than quiet observation. It required action. Calculated, deliberate, without announcing a thing. The first move was financial. One evening, while she was on yet another extended gym session, I methodically separated my income. The new account was already established. Now I rerouted automatic deposits, created clear records of each transfer. Next, I reviewed every joint financial vehicle, credit cards, home equity lines, discretionary accounts. By the end of that week, I had closed the joint cards, citing potential security concerns when asked. I made sure to leave essential household accounts intact, enough to avoid suspicion. But the smaller luxuries, spa memberships, discretionary cards she'd grown accustomed to, were quietly cut off. When the next round of statements arrived, I knew she'd notice. I also knew she'd play it cool, at least at first. The change at home was subtle but deliberate. I stopped initiating unnecessary conversation. My tone remained even, pleasant enough, but detached. If she asked about my day, I answered briefly, without embellishment. If she floated weekend plans, I deferred politely. And the more I withheld my emotional energy, the more she seemed to notice. One evening after dinner, she lingered in the kitchen while I loaded the dishwasher. "You've been different lately," she said, voice light but testing. I wiped my hands slowly, turning to face her. "Just focused on priorities. Nothing you need to worry about." She studied me for a beat longer, then forced a small smile. "Okay. As long as everything's fine." But her eyes didn't match the smile. The narrative she'd been spinning, painting me as immature, emotionally unstable, was quietly unraveling. The man across from her now was composed, controlled, and that unsettled her. Meanwhile, my legal groundwork was solidifying. I'd provided my attorney with everything: financial records, documented changes in her spending, and discreet notes on her new emotional entanglement. No accusations, just facts. Together, we mapped out protections, clear asset trails, evidence of financial shifts, communications demonstrating her narrative efforts. And I prepared contingencies. Property division strategies. Temporary custody frameworks should it come to that. The pieces were aligning. At home, the role reversal deepened. One afternoon, she asked casually about renewing her spa membership, one that had been cut off with the card closure. I met her gaze evenly. I had to review discretionary spending. Some things didn't make the cut. A flicker of irritation crossed her face, quickly masked. "You could have told me." "I didn't think it warranted a conversation," I replied calmly, then returned to my work. Control had shifted. She felt it, even if she couldn't name it yet. The real signal came 2 weeks later. Without prompting, she suggested a check-in dinner, something we hadn't done in months. Her tone was light, almost conciliatory. At the restaurant, she dressed with more care than usual, eyes bright with an edge of forced charm. Midway through the meal, she leaned forward. "I know things have been tense. I want us to get back to a better place." I kept my expression neutral, voice steady. "What place would that be?" Her smile faltered slightly. "Where we can talk openly. Without distance." I let the silence stretch a beat longer than comfort allowed. "Openness goes both ways." She blinked, then reached for her glass. "Of course." But the current between us had changed. Whatever control she thought she held was slipping. And beneath her polished exterior, I could sense it, uncertainty. That night, as she moved through her bedtime routine with forced cheer, I sat in the study, reviewing my files one last time. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. And when the time came, I would not be the one scrambling for footing. The roles had flipped. She just hadn't fully realized it yet. But soon she would. I'd been careful. Methodical. But sometimes the most valuable clues come unplanned. It happened late on a quiet Sunday afternoon. She'd left her laptop open on the dining table, unusual for her. Normally, she kept it close. Guarded. I passed by on my way to refill my coffee. The screen was still active, email app open, trash folder visible. It wasn't intentional snooping. But when something catches your eye, instinct takes over. At the top of the deleted items was a string of draft emails, all to the same address, lawoffices_kesslerfamily@gmail.com. My pulse slowed, not quickened. I knew that name. One of the more aggressive family law firms in the area. I scrolled, heart steady, eyes sharp. One draft was still recoverable. I opened it, reading carefully. The content was blunt, a request for an initial consultation, outlining her concerns. Carefully worded descriptions of an emotionally unstable spouse. Claims of frequent mood shifts, potential volatility if confronted, and a desire to secure a favorable division of assets, with priority for primary stability. I sat down slowly, reading it twice. She hadn't been dismissing me for the sake of her ego. The immature needs comment hadn't been casual superiority. It was staged. A piece of a larger strategy. She had been building a narrative. One designed to position me as unstable, to justify a settlement on her terms, financially and socially. It wasn't just about the other man anymore. This was a planned campaign. I closed the draft, restored the screen exactly as I'd found it. Then I walked calmly to my study and opened my legal file. Everything I'd done so far had been prudent. Now it needed to be precise. I updated my attorney immediately, attaching a full written record of what I'd found. We discussed next steps, how to expand documentation, how to quietly prepare for the inevitable filing, and most importantly, how to control the narrative when the time came. At home, I maintained the same steady rhythm. If anything, I grew more attentive, asking about her work, responding to her small talk with polite interest. Never raising my voice, never showing strain. The more I played this part, the more her unease grew. Subtle signs emerged. She started probing, light questions about how my work stress was, whether I was feeling balanced. All couched in faux concern, fishing for signs of instability she could later reference. One evening, as we finished dinner, she lingered, eyes studying me. "I've been thinking," she said softly. "Maybe we should do another counseling session, just to make sure we're both in a good place." I met her gaze calmly. "If you think it's necessary." She seemed almost disappointed by my even tone, as if hoping for a flicker of emotion to latch onto. Her timing was telling. She'd been preparing to file, but something had shifted. My composure had disrupted her plan. The more grounded I remained, the harder it became for her to paint the story she was building. Meanwhile, through quiet channels, I confirmed something else. The other man had begun pulling back. Word had reached me, his name surfacing in casual conversation through one of our mutual contacts. He was aware of the potential legal mess and wary of involvement. Her new life wasn't lining up as cleanly as she'd hoped, and the cracks were beginning to show. Still, I knew better than to relax. This was a cornered strategy now, one that could become desperate if pressed. I would need to stay one step ahead, all the way through. The next phase was clear: prepare for controlled confrontation. Not an argument, not an outburst. A precise, factual presentation, on my timeline. And when that moment came, she would finally understand that this wasn't her story to write anymore. I would own the narrative. And my future. Timing mattered. And now, it was right. I chose a quiet Thursday evening, no guests planned, no late gym session on her calendar. Just the two of us, an ordinary dinner in an ordinary week. Throughout the meal, she chatted lightly, about office politics, weekend errands. Her tone was practiced, but I caught the tension beneath it. She could feel the dynamic had shifted. She just didn't know why. After clearing the plates, I invited her to join me in the study. "There's something we should talk about." She followed, guarded curiosity in her eyes. I waited until she sat. Then I opened my prepared folder, laying out printed records, financial documentation, timeline notes, key excerpts from her draft emails. Her gaze flicked over them, then back to me. "What is this?" The forced lightness in her voice didn't mask the tightening around her eyes. I met her gaze steadily. "It's a record. Of everything." A pause. I continued, voice even. "I know about your connection with your trainer. I know about the spending changes. I know about the narrative you've been trying to establish, with friends, with that family law firm." Her breath caught, barely audible. She straightened in her chair. "You've been spying on me." I shook my head slowly. "I've been protecting myself, quietly. Because I saw where this was headed." She opened her mouth, as if to pivot, but I raised one hand, calm and deliberate. "If my needs were immature," I said quietly, "then your wants just became unavailable." A beat of silence. The room seemed still, heavy. I leaned in slightly. "You won't be staging an exit on your terms. I've already secured the finances. The attorney is ready. The joint home sale will proceed on equal footing. And if you attempt to spin instability on my part, you'll find the documentation says otherwise." Her expression faltered, anger flickering behind her eyes, then something else, fear. I didn't mean for it to go this way," she said, voice cracking slightly. "We could still." I held her gaze. "There's no we left to salvage. Not after this." She looked down, shoulders tightening. The mask was breaking. For a long moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the ceiling fan. When she finally spoke again, her voice was small. "What happens now?" I kept my tone level. "Divorce will proceed. Amicably, if you choose. If not, well, my side is prepared." Her composure crumbled further, hands clasped tightly, shoulders slumped. The power dynamic had reversed completely. She could see it now. There was no script left for her to play. I stood slowly. "Take the evening to consider your next steps. I expect a response from your attorney by next week." As I left the room, I heard her breath hitch, half a gasp, half a swallowed sob. But I didn't pause. The confrontation wasn't about triumph. It was about reclaiming control. And that had now been done. There would be no more staged narratives. No more hidden strategies. Only truth. And forward movement, on my terms. The official filing came 2 weeks later. Through her attorney, as expected. By then, everything was in motion on my side. My financial protections were locked. My legal response was prepared, calm, factual, undeniable. And the fallout began. The first cracks appeared in her social circle. Once the filing became public record, mutual friends started reaching out. Carefully at first, testing the waters. Several had clearly heard her version of the story already. But as the facts emerged, her narrative didn't hold. I didn't campaign. I didn't explain myself in dramatic fashion. I simply provided clear, consistent truth when asked. Quiet integrity outlasts performance. And over time, it did. Her closest allies grew fewer. The once frequent social invitations dwindled. The man she'd been testing the waters with, he stepped back almost immediately when legal complexities arose. No surprise there. Financially, the picture shifted sharply. With the joint credit avenues closed and discretionary spending exposed, her lifestyle contracted quickly. No more quiet spa afternoons or boutique studio charges disguised as wellness. The sale of the house proceeded as planned, equal footing, clean division. No hidden leverage. No surprise claims. At work, I focused. Harder than I had in years. The clarity brought by the ordeal sharpened my priorities. Professional relationships deepened. New opportunities surfaced. But the personal scars remained. I won't pretend the process was clean or painless. There were nights when the house felt colder than I'd imagined. When memories of what had once been, a shared glance, a laugh in the kitchen, surfaced with a sting. False normalcy is a cruel ghost. Even after truth breaks through, remnants linger. And yet, with each week, strength returned. Not a sweeping recovery. A gradual, earned one. I built new routines. Mornings that began with focus, not tension. Evenings spent on projects of my choosing, no longer weighed down by unspoken tensions. Friends, the ones who truly mattered, remained. A few distanced themselves, whether out of loyalty to her or discomfort with the truth. That was fine. Necessary, even. I kept my boundaries clear. No rushed new connections. No attempts to fill the space too quickly. Healing, real healing, isn't born of avoidance. In quieter moments, I reflected, not on what I'd lost, but on what I'd learned. Trust is a gift, not a given. Vigilance matters, not paranoia, but awareness. And above all, self-respect is not negotiable. She had tried to rewrite our story. To cast me as unstable, to seize advantage through staged narratives and calculated moves. But in the end, truth held. And I walked forward, not unscarred, but unbroken. The final meeting, when we signed the closing documents for the house, was telling. She arrived composed, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion, a recognition of battles lost, narratives failed. Our exchange was brief, civil. As we parted, she hesitated. I never thought it would end like this, she said softly. I met her gaze, steady. That's because you thought you'd control the ending. No malice. Just fact. I walked away knowing this chapter was closed. Not erased, but complete. The path ahead remains my own. No need to rush it. No need to prove anything. Strength isn't in the victory. It's in surviving with your integrity intact. And that, in the end, is exactly what I chose.
Thank you for watching. Bye.